Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. It's your girl Jennifer, and this is Against All Odds, and I'm back with another very interesting and exciting conversation. Welcome. So today I want us to discuss something that could be a little bit controversial, and also it could be a little bit mind-boggling. So yeah, let's get into this conversation. I want us today to talk about strict parenting, or maybe to just give it a better name, maybe a family with more boundaries. Yeah, so let's get into this conversation. So my question to you is, like growing up, or when you think about yourself as a parent, if you think about yourself as a carer, guardian to any child or any young person that you're living with, do you think your parenting skills are strict, or are you liberal, or is it laissez-faire where anybody can do what they do think? What kind of parenting style and skills do you use? So I want to talk about strict parenting, the pros and cons, because definitely it has its pros and cons. And as you know, everything I talk about, it's all centered, and the bottom line and the end goal is to better our mental health and well-being, or to address mental health issues that could arise with some of these things. And I like to give personal examples, or examples that I know, because I know people learn well when they can relate to something. So sometimes people call strict parenting styles, they sometimes refer to it as authoritarian. But for me, I want to just talk about it in terms of just strict parents, or families that have boundaries, like tight boundaries, if I could use that word. Yeah, so, and this is a parenting style that is common, but are there advantages, are there disadvantages? So let's dive into that and find out. And as I do this, I will give my own experience, but then you can think about yours and what you went through. I'm not putting like this is how it must be. It's just what I know and what I've related with, and now in my mental health experience as a professional, things that I deal with, and what has informed me to come to get to this point. So please comment in the comment section. Let's interact there, because you have something to add to this conversation. Yeah, so parenting styles, especially, I don't want to talk about the others, but let me just stick to this strict parenting styles. So when people come from strict families where parents are very strict, there are rules of do's and don'ts, what are the challenges do they find themselves into? Or are there things that end up being positive that come out from that kind of a parenting style? And if there are positives, then are there also negatives too in this aspect? So for me, I have mentioned it in previous videos before some time, I came from a very strict family. My parents were very strict, and still are, but definitely not as strict as they used to be, because now we are grown-ups. But again, as I say this, I do not want you to get me wrong, to think like my parents were the worst and everything. No, it is just how they were. And when I look back and I reflect now, many people of my generation, I believe they would say the same. Most of them would say the same of their parents. So I think this is something that happened during that time of our growing up. It was in our generation. That is how parents would parent us. And at that time, strict parents ended up getting like well-behaved children, well high-achieving children, because clearly there were like set rules of this is how we need to do things. And the other thing about this kind of parenting styles then, from my experience, it was, I will not base it more on science, I will base it more on society and expectations. Most of the parents who were strict those days, they were like that because there were values to be upheld that were communal. And when I'm talking about this, I am centering these experiences to Africa because that is where I grew up. In the West, where I am currently, things are done differently. In Africa, it's said, and there's a song that says, it takes the whole village to raise a child. In Africa, children are communal. You discipline them, you bring them up communally. For example, if I am misbehaving and I am walking in the community and somebody who is not my father, who is not my mother, who does not even know me and notices that I am misbehaving, when I am a child, they had the right to correct me. Maybe tell me off, maybe stop me and then find information, where do I come from, who are my parents, and report that behavior to my parents. So that is the generation and the place I grew up from. Currently things are a bit different, but that is where I grew up from. So this is the context I am speaking from. So I grew up in a very strict family, and my parents were strict, and I think they were strict on 3 levels. First, my parents were spiritual, like they were leaders in the society and leaders in the church. So they needed to uphold certain spiritual and religious values that people of their kind needed to uphold. So that was one thing that informed them being very strict. The other thing, my parents were professionals. And my dad was a veterinarian and my mom was a teacher. So on that aspect of being professionals, those days nobody who is in a profession and well-to-do or well-meaning would want to raise children that are not disciplined and well-behaved. So that was the other thing that informed the kind of parenting. The third thing is the communal aspect of things, because the community had to uphold certain values. You were given birth to, you were brought up well, you turned out well. It's your responsibility to bring up your children and help them turn out well, because somebody also helped you and they shaped you by like instilling discipline and certain values. So you see, those 3 major aspects really informed their kind of disciplining and parenting style. And in this type of, when I'm talking about this, abuse is not anywhere on site. Like I'm not talking about any parenting style or skill that would encourage abuse. But for me, in Africa, when we were growing up, we used to be spanked. If you did something wrong, you would be spanked. But as much as I can remember, I never remember being spanked where I could relate it to abuse or feel like I was abused in any way. No. So for me, I know anytime I was spanked, it was on a discipline level. It was it was just to correct something, a mistake. I don't remember having any marks or having any wounds because of being spanked. No, and it was not done in an excessive way. So yeah, so that is, so at least I've given you where my parents came from, but it's not only my parents who were like this. Most of the parents in my generation in the 80s, that is how they did things. So my parents, especially my dad is a disciplinarian, strict disciplinarian. My dad does not, up to date, he does not condone nonsense and ill behavior. No. And I thank him so much. I thank my parents so much for that. My mother was a teacher. How would a teacher teaching and instilling discipline in other children who are not her own children, and she's helping shape other children, how would she then not shape her own children? That would be a conflict of interest, right? So my mom was very keen on discipline. So yeah, so I grew up in a strict family and with very strict rules. And so that I just don't talk and say strict and you're wondering what strict is, let me give examples. For example, in my home, you could never fail to go to church on a Sunday. Not unless you are sick and like very sick, either in hospital or just come from like you're proper sick. You had to go to church on Sunday. Whether you're the house girl, house boy, anybody. The only thing that would be left at home were pets and pottery and cows and dogs, all those things. But as long as you're a human being, hello, you're going to church. That was a must. The other thing was we grew up in Africa. We have this thing that children have to respect their elders. So in one way of respecting the elders, you don't talk back. You never talked back at my parents. In case they said something that you disagreed, you had to let them finish what they were saying. After they finished what they were saying, you would excuse yourself, and maybe if they had misunderstood something, you would ask to explain yourself. But it also had to come in a very courteous way. But nothing like they say something and you're talking back. I think you know how children nowadays sometimes can talk back at their parents. That never happened. In Africa those days, when we go on public transport, or if you are somewhere and you're being served and you're a young person and you're sat down, if an elder comes in, you had to stand automatically. It doesn't matter whether they came after you, you came early, you came hours early, you had to stand and give them a seat. In public transport, we stood and gave them seats. The other thing that would happen in our days, that I do not agree with today, but then it used to happen, and it seemed orderly for them, but I believe the society was not well informed, because nowadays I have seen most of the people all over the world change. In those days, elders used to be served first, children used to be served last. Yes, unfortunately, I think you find it weird, yes, but that's what would happen. I don't know whether they found it quicker to serve the elders, and because children need all this attention, so we'd be served. But it worked because we knew we had to wait, so it was never an issue, you know. Then there's, for us, we had priorities. So, and in levels of importance, spiritual matters were very important. Then academic matters, then communal matters. So, and when I say spiritual, it means now anything to do with church. If there's something going on in church on a weekend and something going on in school on a Saturday, my parents would give preference to things going on in church, because we were brought up with very strong spiritual values. And if something was going on in school and something going on in the community, my parents would give preference to things going on in school, because those days we never had a lot of school activities going on over the weekends. Over the weekends were either church things or community things. So that is like weddings, things, just celebrations within the community. Yes. And in between, if we had a church thing going on and a family function going on, definitely the family function, like for immediate family, would take precedence. So yes, and like that was always known. Even in schools, teachers knew that should you put any school function when there's a conflicting function to do with church or ministry stuff, my parents would give that preference. But also remember, in Africa, most of the schools were religious. Africa, in Kenya, for example, Kenya is a Christian country, so they embrace the Christian values. So there is no way schools would feel like parents choosing that is an intimidation, because even the parents themselves, the school themselves, the heads, the teachers and everything, they were also of the same concept. So for us, I remember very well, we hardly had sleepovers in people's homes, because my dad did not approve of that, because he did not want us to go to any home and be a burden, or go and find another home, their setting is different from our setting, and that would influence us differently or in a certain way, or then other people would come and have sleepovers, and then he has to have a different rules. And so clearly, for a certain age, I think we only started having sleepovers maybe in our teen years, but before that, no. So clearly there were so many things, but my parents' way of doing things was because they wanted us to be disciplined, and also uniformity and consistency, because your child cannot be in different homesteads every now and then, and you expect whatever you're trying to reinforce to continue to be reinforced properly, because in other homes people do different things, and when you go to Rome, they say you do like the Romans. So my dad, and my parents, because of wanting consistency, they had to allow us to remain under their wings. The other thing was this: for us, anybody that came to live with us, was it whether it's for a day, for a week, for a month, for a year, for whatever time, the rules that were in the house were not just set for us as children, they were set for everybody in the house. Everybody had to abide to the rules. So if you come and you are not going ready to abide, then clearly you had to leave, because my dad will not be struggling to discipline us, yet somebody else who is an outsider is coming to make it difficult. You see, so that was like the norm. And so we grew up. As we were growing up, personally, I am very outspoken, I am an extrovert, and I'm a very strong-willed person. So that was my personality. I have two brothers. My brothers are, one is an extrovert like me, but one of my brothers is introverted. He talks, but he's always behind the scenes. He will do everything. As long as you don't just put him out there to be talking all the time, he's okay. So me, I was like the loudest of them, and being the only girl. So it's me who spoke for them. It's me who who tested all the boundaries. Clearly, it's me who gave my parents a hard time compared to my brothers, despite them being very strict. So so that's how we grew up. That was the setting. Now, fast forward, when I got to high school, I said, like, we want to discuss the pros and the cons of being in a strict family. So number one of the pros is that definitely these children will be well behaved, well mannered, disciplined. Those factors are there with children who grow up in strict families and boundaried families. Then the other thing is that these children, like in a strict family, it's like, these are the rule. If you break this rule, this is a consequence. So there are very clear terms of, when you do this, this is the outcome. You see, this is the consequence of what you do. So for example, if my parents are talking to you and you talk back, clearly you just know you're not going to have it nice with them, because probably you will end up having to do something. For example, you may end up like being the one to clean dishes the entire week. You know, there were things that would really make you know that that is not allowed, that is not acceptable. You get. I remember one time, my parents had this rule that we do not bring anything from outside. We're not allowed to get gifts from anybody unless my parents have said yes to it, because my parents did not want us to go into people's homes, admire something, then ask for it, then come home with it and pretend it was a gift. You get. So I remember one time, I remember it like yesterday. I went to a friend's, it was like a distant relative's home. I had been sent to deliver something. After I delivered, one of the daughters in that home had a very small, nice red bag. Very nice. So I wanted it and I asked for it. I asked her, hey, can you give me this bag? And she gave it to me. But when she gave it to me, the mom wanted me to take some eggs back to my parents. So she put some of those eggs in that small red bag. And so I took the eggs, carried them in that bag to show that, yes, yeah, we've been given this present. And definitely with this small bag, then definitely I know I will have to end up keeping it. When I got home, my parents were like, why did you bring this home? You know, you're not allowed to bring things home, because they could tell clearly this bag is an excuse for the eggs, you know. And so my mom told me, thank you for the eggs. Go back and tell so-and-so we are very grateful for the eggs, and now we've sent you back to take back the bag. I can promise you, I was angry. I was angry. You know how you're taking back something and you're cussing and you're thinking like, what kind of parents are these? Why can they see? Because I really liked that bag. And you know how difficult it is to take something back that you had been given and say, this thing is not allowed in our home because there's this rule and everything. So you have to figure out a way of disguising and just giving it back. But again, you have to be clever, because my parents will ask, did Jennifer bring this thing back? And what did she say? You see? So that taking it back and immediately was just to instill, we said you are not allowed to bring things to this house until we have approved of it. And because we did not approve, and your parents know you, your parents know what you care. For me, I liked things. I still love pretty things. So that time I just wanted something pretty and just bring it home and just have it. But my parents were like, no, because if they condone that behavior, I will be going to places and keep on borrowing or taking things, yeah, with the disguise of I have been given as gifts. So you see, by them making me do that, never again did I ever bring something home, because I didn't want that shame and embarrassment of having to take it back. So yes, so there's no in between, there's no gray area in that kind of parenting style, because it's either black or white. The other thing is that children are able to understand like the consequences. So they're like you really know. So you don't even dare, you don't test boundaries, things like that, because you clearly know the outcome. You see, so children are very aware of what they are supposed to do in those families, as much as parents are also very aware of what they are supposed to do. On the consequence of such parenting style, if somebody is an extroverted child, they could end up being introverted because they feel like they cannot express themselves. That could be one negative thing. Another negative thing, children could become bullies, end up becoming bullies. And for me, in high school, I was a bully. I will give that story one day, like in like when talking about bullies and how it all starts. So yes, so they could end up becoming bullies because at home you cannot test boundaries. They are clear-cut things. So when you get an environment outside your home where you can test that, then you end up testing it, and that's when you can end up becoming a bully. Thirdly, one of the other consequences is that these children that you're bringing up could end up also rebelling. For me, in the family, I ended up being a rebellious child at some point. So, because of that parenting style. But the rebellion is not only limited to the parenting style, the parents being strict. For me, there were many factors, and there are many factors that would come, because you need to understand what age is rebellion coming in. Rebellion for me was, and even this bully, was around my teen years. So there are other factors that are motivating this, which could be adolescence, the environment you are in school, the peer pressure, different things happening. So a strict family background could be a part of it, but there are other underlying factors, you see. So it is not just one thing that is causing. So you can't just say because parents are strict, a child will end up being a bully automatically. No. There must be other underlying factors to support this. So, yeah, I said a child could end up being extroverted. And then lastly, I could mention something maybe to do with esteem. So some children who grow up from these backgrounds could have a low self-esteem. So, yeah, so now when you understand all this, I have talked about some of the pros, and now I've talked about the consequences, the cons. Now, where do we draw a line? So if today you ask me, was it a good thing for me to grow up in a very strict family? Was it not? When I look back today, for me, when you ask me, my answer is I am happy I grew up in such a family, and I think I support a strict family, or a more boundaried family. Let me call it a more boundaried family, because boundaried families and boundaried people are much happier in life, and they end up turning out well in life most of the time. But I will put this, because this is what has informed now my research. That can only happen if these three things I am going to mention next are found in the same parenting style. So number one is, if when you are doing, you're a strict parent, or you have more boundaries in bringing up your children and everything, you communicate love. If love is communicated in your parenting style, chances are your children, even if they may have issues here and there of trying to rebel here and there at some stage, but later when they are adults and mature now, and they're able to think and analyze things and weigh out things, the options and things happening, chances are when they realize everything you did for them communicated love, these children will definitely turn out well. Because, for example, when you tell a child, do not come home after 8, if they are teenagers, or if they are 18, and you tell them you cannot, or they're in college, and you say, the last time you can come home, there's a curfew, you cannot come home after 8. In Africa, anytime after 8 o'clock, many people have already slept. Most of the homes, people are sleeping. So after 9, it's the time when crimes and thieves and car traffickers, carjackers start doing funny things. So, why would you want your child to be out and expose them to such people? You see, so when you're setting this rule, it is you're protecting them. You're trying to tell them it's not safe to be home after this time. So I want you to come home within the safe hours, and also try to teach your children responsibility, to know there are times you can do your business from morning up to a certain time. So they need to be responsible enough to know when it gets to a certain time, I need to plan the time I will go home, what transport I'm going to use, because I need to get home by this time. The other second thing that will cause, if you're a very boundaried family, what will cause the children to turn out well is if there's they are not consistent, and them themselves, they are not positive role models. For example, if you as a parent, you're telling your child you cannot come home after 8, and you, the parent, you continuously come home at midnight, what exactly are you communicating to this child? Okay, then the other thing is, the same child, you have told them you cannot come home after 8. So they come home today at 8:30, and then you look at them, you say, what time did I say you come home? Yeah, so there's no consequence. And yeah, and they say, okay, you just said, okay, you try that next time. The next time they come at 9, then you say, okay, you try. I can see now you're growing horns. How people used to say back in Africa. I can see now we have 2 mothers in this house. There's no consequence. So, and you're not consistent. Because they came, they say, you come next time. I can promise you, if there's no consistency, and you parents, as a parent, or as a guardian, as a carer, if you're not setting the standards by being a positive role model, then I can promise you that is going through the window. One time in my life, my mom had done braids on my hair. And then it was a Saturday, and she wanted me to sit down and do my hair, because she wanted to do it on Sunday, so that when we start the week on Monday, she has made my hair and my hair is good. So my mom, for me, I love to play. So I play and play and play the entire day. After I play the entire day, when it comes to be at 6 o'clock, I have not undone my hair. When my mom came and found that I had not undone my hair, she was like, why did you undo your hair? Do you remember I told you to undo your hair? Yes. You cannot sleep until this hair is undone. And what did she do? We had a big house that time. And because we had a big house, we were living in a place where, like, you had to be together in one room for you to feel like safe. It's not like the place was insecure. It's how the environment was, because you could, when the wind is blowing and you're somewhere else, you could feel like somebody is outside, So you needed to be all together. So you can imagine my mom saying, you need to go and sit in a different room and make sure you undo that hair. My friends, my mom made sure I sat there and undid my hair. You can see this, you should know the speed I did it with. Because one, fear was motivating me. I was so afraid to be in that room by myself. I quickly undid my hair. That was the last time my mother ever told me to undo my hair, and I prioritized playing over undoing my hair. You see, when there are consequences, and when a parent is there to reinforce, so it is consistent. Thirdly, this thing also, the third thing is that when you're a strict parent, and if you want it to work, you have to grow with the children. For example, the strict rules of a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old cannot be the same for when you're 18, 20, going onwards. You see, so you have to be adaptive. And you have to grow with the children. So these rules, yes, you're being strict, but your strictness is at the level of where the children are. Because, for example, when I was in primary school, my curfew of getting back home was 6. Because at that time, school would finish at around 5. So my parents give you like an hour of being on the road, walking with your friends, playing, catching up, whatever you will do within that 1 hour, so that by 6 you are home. That was when I was in primary school. When I got to go to college, I was still living under my parents' roof, so they extended the curfew to 8 o'clock. You see, meaning they are growing with me. They are changing as I change. When I was younger, we used to be dropped to places. If you're going to this place, you would be dropped. when it became, we matured a little bit and we were able to navigate places, then we would be trusted with money to get on buses or public transport and take yourself somewhere and bring yourself somewhere back at a certain time. So if your parents, if the parents are also adapting and growing with you as you grow, then that is going to work. Those three things: communicating love, secondly, consistency and positive role modeling, and growing and adapting as the children grow. Those three things, if you're parenting and you're a strict parent or boundaried family, more boundaried family, and then these three aspects are there, trust me, even if in between the children will test boundaries, deviate a little bit, it will just be for a short while. But later they will come back, because who does not want to know, who does not want to feel like, yes, I know I cannot stay up till midnight, but it's because my parents love me so much, they do not want anything to happen to me. I remember for me, my dad had this rule, especially when I had the 8 o'clock rule. My dad would be like, if you're somewhere, because things can happen, you can be out, you didn't intend to be late, but then there's no transport, because in Africa those things happen. There's no transport, it has started raining all of a sudden. My dad would be like, don't get yourself in a mess, call me. And when you call my dad, he would be there in a flash to pick you up. That, you see that consistency of knowing that, yes, because as soon my dad told me, okay, you cannot come after 8, but now, but in case of anything, call me. Then when I call him, he's not there. You see, that would put me in a place to think like, so what's the point of calling him? What's the point of even communicating? You see, when I got to college, my dad bought me a phone and told me, anything I need to know, make sure you call me or text me, or in Kenya they call it, send me a please call me, so that person, my dad, calls you back if you don't have calling credit. Meaning, he's giving you the power to communicate. Anything that you think he needs to know, you need to communicate. You see? So, that is what I know, and I think, and I want to hear from you what you think. What kind of parenting style, what kind of a family did you come from? Was it a very strict family? Was it like moderate? Was it like everybody did whatever they felt like? What kind of a background did you come from? Please enrich this conversation. Do you think strict families, have you seen a family that was strict and then things didn't go very right? What do you think were the mistakes made? Let's converse and have and enrich one another. So I always say, to change the world, you need to change your mind. This has been Against All Odds. Catch you in the next video. Bye.